we are joined by Her Excellency Dr. Aricana Chihombori-Quao, former AU Ambassador to the United States, now the founder of African Diaspora Development Institute. My sister, welcome.
Thank you for having me, my brother, and happy Africa Day.
Happy Africa Day to you. Today is slowly going to an end, but what, 1963, that'll make it what, 37 and 20, that'll 57 years ago. They got together and tried to put Africa together. It's been going and going and going, and all this while, one can say we haven't seen much results. What do you think? Where do you see Africa Day, African unity today?
Well, we're nowhere near where we need to. The wishes of our Pan-African fathers back in 1963 are yet to be realized. That it has taken us this long to accomplish a task that is so needed, a task that is so monumental and pivotal to the development of Africa. But be it as it may, we have the African Continental Free Trade Area now, which is our hope for an Africa speaking with one voice, our hope on the world stage as one powerful customs union. So we are in the valley, but we are aiming for the mountaintop. So we hope that with the African Continental Free Trade, whose implementation is going to begin hopefully in January of 2021, is going to find herself in a different place. But it takes all of us understanding our history and what needs to be done.
Okay. You know, there's been so many, starting from 1963, and different people, it seemed like at every given time, every once in a while, there's this push for Africanism, and then it dies down. Why do you think right now what we're seeing is different?
I'm hoping that this time is going to be different, because how bad do things have to get before we can all wake up and say enough is enough? The abuse of not only Africans on the continent, but the abuse of Black people around the world, it can no longer be tolerated. We are the ones who are coming from a righteous position. We have been victims for centuries. At what point are we going to say enough is enough? I think slowly our people are beginning to engage in the right, to really ask the right questions as to why is what is being done to us as a race is being done. Why is the exploitation of Africa going on? Why has it been allowed to go on as long as it is continued? Why do we, Black people in general, continue to hate ourselves and each other? Why is it that we cannot get along for the purposes of serving ourselves as individuals as well as the race? So I think it's gotten to a point where people are getting sick and tired of being sick and tired. We are blatantly abused, and we seem totally incapable of pushing back and fighting and defending our turf. What is being done to Africa and the Africans or at home and abroad is unacceptable, and it is blatantly wrong. The perpetrators are aware that what they're doing to Africa is wrong, and they continue to do it. I'm reminded of a friend who once said, he did ask a journalist as to why these journalists continue to misrepresent, misreport truths about Africa. And the journalist very blatantly answered, challenges us. Nobody challenges us. So they can lie about Africa, they can abuse Africa, and they continue to do it and get away with it because we do not challenge them. Our young people are beginning to ask the right questions. They are engaging in the right conversations, and they want to know why. And I think that is what you are beginning to see. The tide is changing. The people are waking up, and there is an increased level of awareness about what is going on in Africa and how Africa got to be where Africa is today.
Late in October last year, I met you for the first time. I interviewed you in Dallas, and you said something during that interview. I asked you if Macron is a new type of French leader, and you said you hope so. Last week, France, for the first time, basically ratified an agreement in France that basically ends 75 years of CFA. and their financial umbilical cord that ties the Francophone countries to France, they have begun to undo those. Do you think, and you have been very vociferous about calling France out, do you feel vindicated? Do you feel like what you said,
Well,
what you did, has resulted in you've achieved the result?
I sure hope so. But I do know that we all have been speaking to it from different platforms. If my voice, if I use the platform that I had as the AU ambassador to the United States to be the voice for the voiceless, I hope that in a small way that made a difference. But again, it goes back to, if I had stayed as the family medical doctor in Tennessee, I don't think people would have heard me to the extent that they did. So because I had been given a platform to represent 1.27 billion people on the continent and 250 the Americas, I felt very strongly that whatever the consequences were, it was my responsibility and to push back and speak to the abuses that were being meted to the Africans. So whether that made a difference or not, I do not know. But what I do know is one thing. Before I started to the issue of the Pact for the Continuation of Colonization, a lot of people that I spoke to were not aware. That includes even some people within the government right here in the United States. They were not aware of the Pact for the Continuation of Colonization, let alone the African Diaspora and just people in general. That was a very shocking finding for me, that such a blatantly wrong was being allowed to continue, and people massively were not aware of it. I mean, you're talking $500 billion out of Africa by little bit of France, and most people were not aware of it. So that was appalling. It was unbelievable. But be it as it may, I felt that until the Africans understood the root causes of Africa's problems, we can't begin to strategize and come up with solutions and give us the desired result, of which is that of building an integrated, prosperous, and peaceful Africa, which is speaking with one voice, united as one continent. So I don't know if I was able to make a difference. I don't know if what they did was in response to the outcry from the people. What I do know is I was sent to Washington, D.C. to represent, and I did my job to represent to the best that I could, irrespective of what the consequences may have been.
Very good. Now, you live in a country where we've seen some people, let's say at a lower position, let's say chief financial officer, they achieve results and they upgrade them to the chief executive officer. You had a platform in Washington, D.C., and clearly what you use that platform has achieved results with the Francophone countries. Now it's time, the current AU chair, his time is coming up, election is coming up in February next year. It's time for an upgrade for you because you've shown the results. Are you interested in becoming the AU chair?
Well, it's funny you should ask me that question. There's actually, last week, somebody sent me a petition, some group of people started, where they're asking the African heads of states and suggesting to them that I be the next chairman of the African Union Commission, and that Professor Lumumba should be the deputy. They must have really taken some time to think about it. They even have a list of people they think should be to us, starting with the former president of Ghana, and many others. The people are frustrated. The Africans need change. And, Professor and I, we had a conversation about asking them to stop the petition. On a personal level, I'd had two prior groups that had started another petition about me becoming the chair of the African Union Commission. I had to really humbly ask them to please take it down. I didn't want to be misunderstood. But after talking to the professor, and the professor and I felt very strongly that the people are frustrated, and I couldn't keep shutting them down. They just wanted to be heard. And besides, they were not communicating to me, they were communicating to the African heads of states. So we decided to let the people's voices be heard. Now, I'll tell you one thing. Depending on the conditions on the ground, I have no problems running for chair. I have no problems running for a higher office within the African Union Commission. At the end of the day, we need to do what needs to be done. Yes, the consultations will be with our principals. If the principals feel that this is something that they feel I could, it's a role that I could fill, I am comfortable having conversations with our principals along those lines. I'm definitely ready to serve in whatever capacity that our principals would want me to serve.
Very good. So there are 54 votes of the African leaders. If you're interested, you know that these things are not given on a silver platter. There has to be some lobbying going on. Are we ready?
I have not been lobbying any heads of states. And like I said, I am more interested in seeing the African agenda moving forward. And again, I can repeat that I do not mind running for higher office, but of course that has to be in consultation with the principals. So whatever is best for the continent is what I'm prepared to do.
What if you become the AU chair, and these people, these leaders, they want you to tone it down? Would they have their way?
Well, again, the reason as to why I should tone anything down. We're simply speaking our truth. I don't think they will have a problem with that. The truth is also what they want. Being in leadership is about representation. We don't have the liberty to be diplomatic. How do you engage diplomatic conversation when you are under the table waiting for the person who you are supposed to be having a diplomatic conversation with to drop a few chunks under the table? They are on the table eating food in our home, and we are under the table waiting for them to drop the few crumbs. While we are under the table, we are asked to be diplomatic, to engage in a diplomatic conversation with them. We don't have the liberty. They have the liberty to have their diplomatic conversations as European countries. We do not have the liberty to have diplomatic conversations with them until we get to be on the table, until we get to be equal. Then we can have a diplomatic conversation. What is called for right now is to simply say, my brother, my sister from Europe, you have been slapping me for far too long. I have been turning another cheek for far too long. What you're doing is wrong. You need to stop it. And when you stop beating me up, when you stop burning me, then we can have a diplomatic conversation as equals. But while I'm under the table and you are on the table, we cannot have a diplomatic conversation. We are not equal. We must equalize the playing field. And that means calling a spade, looking at the perpetrators and the abusers in the face, and simply telling them to stop. The sad part is they know what they're doing is wrong, and they need to stop it, which is why I'm so glad that the French saw the need to stop the African heads of states from going to deposit their bank reserves with France. That was criminality of the highest order, and I'm sorry it took as long as it did, but I'm glad it has finally come to an end. All we had to do for that to happen, speak out, and defend our turf. So systematically, we need to take one item after another, starting with the unfair trade practices, going on to all the way to the frivolous predatory loans African countries are getting, the World Bank and IMF, all the way to multinational corporations who are paying taxes on the continent and using the safe havens, to illegal mining, to illegal fishing illegal trade in life and plants. The abuse is abound, is everywhere. We systematically look them in the eye and say, you have been doing this, it is wrong, and you know it, and you stop. There's no other way to be diplomatic with someone who is blatantly abusing you. You simply have to tell them to stop it.
Okay, it seems like we're back to the same, we've gone a full circle. Back in 1963, when they got together, there was the Casablanca group and then there was a Monrovia group. The Monrovia group were many, many more than the Casablanca group. And it seemed to me the Monrovia group were the quote unquote diplomatic group and the Casablanca group being the, tell it like it is, or shall I say, call them out people, whatever the name is. When you look at the leadership of Africa today, what percentage do you think mirrors the Casablanca group, and what percentage do you think mirrors the Monrovia group? Because you know them all.
It will be difficult to say. What I can tell you is I see a shift in the vision for Africa. I see a certain level of camaraderie. When I have been present and privy to some of the deliberations, the spirit of Pan-Africanism was very strong. So I really think the majority of African leaders today are very Pan-African, and they understand why there needs to be change in direction. There's a need for us to speak out. So yes, the spirit of Pan-Africanism is high among the African heads of states, which is why I do know for a fact that they too want the change, because it is the only way that peace and security can prevail in their own countries.
AfCFTA, African Continental Free Trade Area, how significant is it? Please connect the dots between AfCFTA to African liberation for us.
It is huge. It is monumental. And that's another part that you can say, where are our media? Why is it that we never highlighted this monumental decision? This is exactly what Africa for centuries. This is exactly what our Pan-Africa trying to do back in 1963. That's what they were trying to accomplish. We finally did, albeit after 56 years. So African must understand why this is a monumental decision. It is a turning point, a major turning point for the continent, that everybody must play in making sure that come 2021 January, the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area is going to go on as can be. It is a major decision that must be supported. Africa will now be able to trade with Africa. It's no longer going to be mission impossible for neighbors to trade with each other. No, we allow our products to perish at the border because we are waiting for clearance. A woman selling her produce from should be able to take a high-speed train all the way to Cairo and spend the night back home in South Africa if she chooses to. So the boundaries melting away is exactly what the Pan-African fathers wanted. The boundaries melting away is going to be humongous in terms of economic development. It is what has been keeping us from moving as a continent, speaking with one voice. So yes, the African Continental Free Trade Area is a monumental decision, and everyone that has any interest in Africa must support the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area.
Very good. Now, I'm going to take you on a journey. If, say, Norway or let's say Netherlands came up with a medication for COVID-19 and the World Health Organization was dragging its feet, I'm sure within the EU system, they would have a medical unit that would say, look, if you're not going to approve it, we're going to approve it for ourselves and use it in Europe. Does Africa have such a facility? And if not, should we have that? Because AfCFTA is going to be for trade. But there is going to be a need for Africans to be able to approve our own herbal medicine if World Health Organization is dragging its feet like it's doing with the Casablanca group. What is your vision on that or position on that?
Well, I'm glad you brought out COVID-19. COVID-19 is going to be a turning point also for the country. I think because of the COVID-19, starting with the supply and availability of the PPEs, African countries are being forced to look inwards. So we are hoping that we will emerge out of COVID with a very robust manufacturing sector for the Africans. We are beginning to see lots of inventions coming out of Africa, more and more countries coming up with manufacturing of even ventilators, as well as all the PPEs. COVID-19 is going to force us to look from within because we are very capable of ourselves. I applaud the president of Madagascar for the position that he took in terms of defending African intellectual property. In the past, this has been served and taken over to Europe. And before you know it, it's now by an outside or individual. And now Africans are having to purchase, paying through the nose for what was originally ours. So yes, it is time for Africa to introspect and reassess our position and realize that we need to start with Africa. Let's look from within. We have what it takes to have every infrastructure that we need, including the big pharma that we can begin to manufacture our own drugs. A lot of drugs that we use in the way, they're found in Africa. We just don't carry the patents for those drugs. That's why I'm really glad that the president of Madagascar did not allow the COVID organics to get out of our hands, and that those who are interested in learning more about COVID organics, they're more than welcome to come and join their research institute in Madagascar, which I understand that institute has been in place since 1957. Some of the best scientists I know are Black people. They're Africans. They're Africans on the continent. They're Africans abroad. Does it matter whether it's an African who is a research scientist? Does it matter if it's an African who's a research scientist at Oxford or a research scientist in Madagascar? All we are saying is World Health Organization has finally done the right thing by joining hands with Madagascar and saying, if there is a possible cure for this horrible enemy that has descended upon Earth, let's all come together and make sure that this cure is available to all, not just those who can afford it, but available truly to all. Let's also give credit where credit is due. At this point, credit is due to Madagascar. Credit is due to Africa. Let's keep what belongs to Africa. No more shall Africa continue to be exploited. No more shall outsiders fly into Africa and just blatantly loot from us daylight. That we will not allow, and we should be vigilant. We should stand out and make sure the abuse of the exploiter is no longer going to continue. Kudos to the president of Madagascar for a job well done.
Okay, as you know, these days there are United States bases on the continent. We also heard about a Chinese police station in, I think, Zambia or one of those countries. What is your position on those? Should you become the chair of African Union Commission?
Well, the situation in China, it's unfortunate that when China started coming to Africa, we did not negotiate well. They were not good neighbors. They were not good visitors who should have really negotiated with us in good faith. They knew that African countries were suffering. They were struggling. The loans we were getting from the West were very difficult loans. We were made to jump through hoops to get a small amount of money. So they took advantage of that position and came to Africa with an abundance of funding. Where they would, we jokingly say, the Chinese would say, how much do you want with a checkbook in hand? And so because of the availability of cash, in many cases, as Africans, we did not negotiate well. We did not read between the lines on a lot of contracts. But I have to say, since the FOCAC meeting, the Forum of China-Africa Cooperation, FOCAC, that was held in 2018, the African heads of state sent a very strong message to President Xi Jinping that the abuse of Africa can no longer continue. While we value the relationship with China, China also Africa with respect and treat Africa fairly. That is all we ask. So a lot of our discussions took place. A lot is currently changing. A lot of contracts that were not well negotiated are getting canceled. So the relationship with China is getting better in terms of the trading. And so it's now up to us as Africans to be able to make sure that when we negotiate with China, it is ultimately in the best interest of the Africans. Not we did allow the Chinese to have their way, but that is coming to an end. We're not going to tolerate it anymore. And China must understand that the writing is on the wall. Either they come to Africa and treat Africans fairly. They too also must understand that we have Africans in China. They must treat the Africans in China as nicely as we treat the Chinese in Africa. So the writing is on the wall, and I'm sure President Xi Jinping is going to make the right adjustments. He's going to make sure that he educates his people about how they must behave when they go to Africa, about the do's when they engage Africa. Otherwise, the Africans are not going to take it. It really is that simple. So yes, mistakes were made in the past, but those mistakes are being corrected.
Okay. So when it comes to whom we should have our eyes and be careful with, there's been a lot of talk about China these days, but we also have the former colonials. I don't want to use the colonial masters, but those former colonials. And we also have the West, United States. These three blocks, who should we be most careful with?
To be honest with you, anybody that's coming into your house, must be careful for all of them. When it comes to the issue of the former colonizers, I often say, and of course, you know, they're still colonizing us in a different format. It's now economic colonization. I often use an example of growing up in our village. I remember one ambassador put it very nicely. He said, you see, growing up in the village, we had animals that lived around our villages. The Chinese are like, he equated the Chinese to the hyena that comes into your village, and the hyena will steal some, but also understands that there are still some villagers, and therefore they leave some crops for the other villagers so they have something to eat. So they might bring in, the Chinese will bring in 50 billion, but they'll take out 30 billion. The West, on the other hand, they are like the lion. They storm into the village, they take everything that they can. What they cannot take, they destroy. So, but at the end of the day, we look at it as we have two thieves in the village. We got an old thief and a new thief. So what position is the old thief standing on, warning us about the new thief? You are still a thief. So don't warn us about the new thief. The truth of the matter is we, the Africans, must realize that we got two thieves in the village. We got an old thief and a new thief, and they both gotta go. Either we work with them and we come up to an agreement that we work together, we treat each other with mutual respect. But let's first and foremost understand that we got two thieves and they both gotta go. They have no business being there. Until we realize that we have to deal with both equally, they're both coming from outside. We must negotiate as Africa first, just like they're dealing with their countries. Let's also be good negotiators. We are quite comfortable. We welcome foreign direct investment. Don't get me wrong. We go to their countries the same way they come to the African countries. This is a global world, but the process of globalization has not been a fair one. How do you go to the market, to a global market, to buy when my friend has all the money and I have no money, and we talk about globalization? My friend is going to buy right on. So let's be very careful as we go through globalization. Let's also protect the Africans. We want direct investment, but let's be wise about it. Let's understand what is really at stake. Let's also make sure that those who are being friends, that they are really, truly friends. All we ask is that when they come to Africa, they should pack their luggage chock full of humility, honor, and respect for the Africans. And I can assure you, we will roll out the red carpet for them. That is all we ask.
Well, talking about red carpet, we're already rolling it out to them. Now, I want you to look in the camera, please, and talk to the African. Why is it that someone who's coming to exploit you, you roll the red carpet for? But when you go to their country to work hard to earn a meager living, they treat you like dirt. You have what happened in China. You have what is happening in the United States. That's United States, all blacks are under siege. And then in Europe, in Ukraine, African students are being killed. Nothing is being done about it. Even in India, a Nigerian professor gets killed. Nothing comes out of it. Why is it that Black lives don't matter on the globe? And what can we do about it? That thing bothers me. I'm curious what you think about that.
Well, again, it goes back to the mind. I often say, no amount of education can decolonize you. No amount of education can get rid of the legacy of slavery. When you go to the boardroom to negotiate on behalf of a country, when you go to the boardroom to negotiate on behalf of the continent, if your mind is in the gutter, results are going to be in the gutter. It is a very simple matter that if we roll out a red carpet for those who are coming to Africa, if they do not reciprocate by giving us the red carpet, guess what? We just stop giving carpet. I mean, you look at an example, the amounts of monies that Africans are being charged to pay for visas to go to certain countries. Well, if you charge us excess to get a visa, what? We're also going to charge your citizens the same amount of money to get it. Whatever roadblocks you put on our people going to your country, we will reciprocate accordingly. We will also give the same roadblocks to your people when they come to the country. The truth of the matter is, the world needs Africa. Africa does not need the world. If you look at all the monies that are coming to Africa in terms of aid, that is a facade. That's one of the biggest lies that Africa needs. Let's analyze from one country to another. You put on one end the amount of aid going into that country, and then on the other hand, you look at the amount of natural resources coming out of that country going to the West or China. No comparison. The aid is complete peanuts. If the African leaders were to come in and say, listen, keep your aid, we're going to keep our natural resources, let's see how quickly that conversation is going to change. Again, it goes back to all we got to do and defend our turf. Hands down, there is no comparison. The aid versus natural risk coming out of each and every African country, there is no comparison. It is total peanuts. So that means those who are negotiating on behalf of the countries, they must be realistic. They must look at these people and say, thank you very much. Take your aid. Either we have A, B, C, D, E, or you're out. And let's not be apologetic about it. And that takes having a backbone. And that also takes having your mind in the right place, not being afraid of saying that to a white person. Too many of us are too afraid of white people. Why? I do not know. But you take the average Black person and you put them in front of a white person, their knees buckle in. Where we are supposed to speak up, we don't speak up. We suddenly become mute. That's a much bigger problem that we are dealing with. Because if everybody that is going to negotiate will go to negotiate with nothing but Africa on their minds and ready to fight and not worry about the consequences from anybody, because you are there to do a job, that is what it takes. Everybody must take that position to fight and defend our Africa, because this time it's not about us as individuals, it's about our children, our grandchildren, and generations to come. The respect that Black people around the world deserve depends on how stable Africa is. We must defend Africa at all costs. If the Black race and the respect that is going to come our way.
Hello, my name is Kofi Opon Ochre, and I bring you NASA on DNT, a program designed to expose corruption and indiscipline in our society and advocate for the punishment of these offenders whose activities impede national development. The National Road Safety Commission indicates that Ghana loses $230 million to road accidents, with over 1,600 deaths recorded every year. In 2018, Shride report indicated that Ghana loses 13.5 billion Ghana cedis to corruption. And United Nations Children's Fund UNICEF has also stated that Ghana loses $290 million to poor sanitation alone. This is not right. So make a date with me, and together let's name and shame the offenders of the law. NASA, see something, say something.
We're locked on Hello Entertainment Box. Hello Entertainment Box.
Hello Entertainment Box.
Hello Entertainment Box.
Hello Entertainment Box.
Okay, so this point is particularly interesting to me. You are saying that the white guy or the Chinese guy that got on a plane with a briefcase coming to Africa with investment money, he's not coming to do us a favor.
Not at all. They are not traveling 10,000 miles, 15,000 miles because they love us. No, not at all. I mean, that's laughable, actually. They're not traveling thousands of miles because they love the Africans. Let's make no mistake about that. There is something amazing and wonderful going on our beloved continent. Let's understand that. They did not travel thousands of miles because they love the Africans. Far from it. They're coming to Africa because there's something wonderful and amazing going on in Africa.
Well, if that is the case, then why do we still have the mentality that, oh, we don't want to do this because we'll anger them and they will not come, and if they're killing our boys there, well, I'm not going to say it because that might hurt a business deal that's going on. What is the thinking here? What am I missing?
Well, again, it goes back to the disease, my brother. That's why I always say, until we decolonize ourselves, until we're no longer suffering from the legacy of slavery and colonization, that is where we are in the intensive care with this disease. That mind, the process of brainwashing us, the process of putting us to sleep. Remember, this agenda has been going on for years. I use an example of something very simplistic and yet so profound. Have you ever wondered, why is it that when Christianity was brought to Africa, I can give an example of growing up in my own village of Zimbabwe. The British came to Rhodesia, rather I call it Zimbabwe, and they renamed it Rhodesia, until 1896. The missionaries taught us about the white angels and the white Jesus Christ, and that they were white, even though when you look at it, they do not look like a white sheet of paper, but they call themselves white. And then they proceeded to ascribe all the wonderful, desirable things are white. The angels are white. The angels are pure, and that we must worship them. Then they turned around and taught us about the devil, and that the devil was black and the devil was evil. The devil represented everything that was undesirable. They turn around and look at us, us Africans, and say, you people are black. We never questioned it, just accepted it. I do not blend into my black dress. I do not blend into my black purse or my black shoe. And yet I was just told, you are black. And then you represent everything the world does not like, everything the ugly, and now that is who you are. That little child grows up being told you are white, you represent the angel, you represent Jesus Christ, you represent everything desirable and lovable and acceptable. And when they leave home every day to the world validates them at home. When children, black children, leave home and go into the world validates the negative, all those negative images. Regardless of how much we tell our children that they're black and beautiful, the world outside is telling them otherwise. These are subliminal messages. And then they took it to another. We go to look at churches across Africa. We're all worshiping a white Jesus Christ. We're worshiping the white angels. Who has seen the angel, for heaven's sake? Who has seen the devil, for heaven's sake? Those are all lies. They were given to us and we just said at a plunge. We must teach our children that being an angel or being a devil has nothing to do with color. It is based on this. You become a devil if you are doing devilish things. You become an angel if you are behaving in an angelic manner. Color has nothing to do with it. But the missionaries that came to Africa, they came with an agenda to demoralize the original people, to demoralize the origins of humanity, to demoralize the black woman who gave birth to the first human being. That was their agenda, to demoralize us. And we failed to stand up and say, liar, stop it. And that time is now that we need to take truth to power. So I'm saying our failure to defend ourselves, our failure to stand up and say, dude, this is wrong, you can't continue to do this, it's because we have been systematically brainwashed. And this has been passed on to us from one generation to another. That's why we must understand the truth for what it is. You are not black because you don't look like the color black. You don't represent the devil. They are not white. I have not seen a white person who looks like a white piece of paper. So why are we being told these blatant lies and we just accept them? Jesus Christ was not white. When Mary and Joseph were running away from Herod, they were told to go to Egypt. Why? Because in Egypt, they knew Jesus Christ would blend with other dark-skinned people. If Jesus Christ was white, they would have sent Mary and Joseph to go to Europe. Jesus Christ was a brown person. We were being told. So every Sunday, keep this, I gotta make this point, my brother. Every Sunday, black people, according to Christianity, we are worshiping white angels and a white Jesus Christ, people who do images that do not represent us as black people. And we are being told to shy away from the black devil that represents us. How do you raise a child with good self-esteem in such an environment where all the images that represent his color, her color, are undesirable and negative? So now we never worship a black Jesus Christ. We never worship black angels. We always worship white angels and white Jesus Christ. Now you understand what the root of the problem is, my brother. It is deep, but we must understand for what it is. And wherein lies the problem. Regardless of how much education, if you do not wake yourself up, if you do not educate yourself, if you do not learn about your history and understand the lies for what they are, you will always be suffering from this affliction. And sadly, too many of us black people are suffering from the legacy of slavery and the legacy of colonization. I cannot overemphasize this enough, which is why I've written a book called Africa 101, The Wake Up Call, because we are all fast asleep and we need to wake up.
Okay, so now, you know as well as I do that every operation begins with brainstorming, strategic thinking, execution, and results, okay? What you just narrated, that they came in, they said, okay, somebody had to have sat down and said, let's think and say, oh, the Jesus should represent white, the devil should represent. They sat down and planned all this to execute their agenda. So my question to you is this: how come we don't have an agenda? How come we don't have a plan to execute it? And why are we always playing defense? When are we going to sit down and pay a group of people every country should have a group of people that does nothing but think, pay them to think about how to create a vision and the strategy to approach that vision. They did it, but we don't. Why?
Well, again, it goes back to the Berlin Conference, my brother. The reason it happened to the tiny little economies is so we come together to speak with one voice. They put systems in place to keep us as little operating in silent economies. It has taken a long time to undo that damage. It was a well-orchestrated plan. After everything they had done to emotionally and otherwise, and psychologically and otherwise, and ourselves, we Black people, are suffering from battered wife syndrome. After a woman has been abused for so long by her husband, she gets to where that getting beaten by her husband every day becomes so normal, she doesn't even see it as anything wrong. Being abused by the husband on a daily basis has become a normal way of life that she doesn't even realize how far off it's been. It takes somebody who understands what's really going on in the home to say, do you not understand what you're doing is wrong? We're suffering from battered wife syndrome, where we should speak up about the abnormalities, about abuse that we are that's being meted to us. We're simply accepting it as we are normalizing the abnormal. We're in disease, and we must realize that we are suffering from the battered wife syndrome. The battered woman realize that you need to pack your bags and run as far away as you can. You are in a very abnormal situation that is only going to lead to your demise sooner or later. That is where we need to be as Black people. We need to wake up. We need to understand our circumstances. We need to be shaken up. But let's understand we're suffering from the battered wife syndrome. You're quite right. These are low-hanging fruits. These are simple things that we could just sit down, one meeting, we can get a lot of things solved. For example, the $500 billion to China every year. Why were we not talking about it? Why has it taken this long for China to do this? So we're talking some just serious abuses that are happening.
France.
That, I mean, yes,
France,
you take, for example, yes, you take, for example, even now as we speak, we have remains of our ancestors scattered throughout Europe. They are refusing to give back the remains of our ancestors for proper burial. Who does that, my brother? It is insanity of the highest order, and yet they feel entitled. Zimbabwe has just now gotten authorization from Britain to receive to get back the remains of the Zimbabwean people who were taken to Britain. President Mugabe had been fighting since 1980 to get those skulls. Where are these people coming from? What justification do you have to refuse to give back evidence of murder? Okay, we understand maybe you didn't do it, but your ancestors did. You have a responsibility to do the right thing. We have artifacts, expensive African artifacts littered all over European museums. They look right in the camera and say, yeah, we know we took them from Africa, but we're not giving them back. Where else could they do that and get away with it? How long could a German skull last in Namibia? How long would a French skull last in Cote d'Ivoire? How long would the British skull last in Zimbabwe? Not even 24 hours. Not only will they storm into those countries, they will take the remains of that soldier or whoever the foreign citizen is, and in addition, they will murder thousands of locals in the process. But only in Africa, and they do it because they can. Why aren't we standing up? Why aren't we pushing back? You see the depth of the disease. It's like a battered woman sits in front of me as a doctor and is telling me about the husband here every day. And that as soon as the husband comes home, she wishes he could just beat it and get it over with until tomorrow. And again, and again, and again. No, my brother, that is the sad story of Africa. Why are we so powerless dealing with the most obvious, the most egregious abuses. That is the sad story of Africa. And that's why we must all continue to speak out. We must make sure that every African that needs to hear must hear, and every African that needs to wake up must wake up. Our children must understand, and we as elders, we have responsibility to let our children know that there were problems in our village in Africa. These are the problems. Let's line them out for them. This is what we have done, whatever we are able to do. So when we at this world, we can say, children, this is where we left. I certainly want to be able to look at my granddaughter 20 years from now. When she says, Grandma, all this has been going on in Africa. What did you do? I want to be able to look at my daughter and say, my granddaughter, and say, you know what, granddaughter? On a personal level, this is what I did. As a race, this is what we did. Now, this is where you guys, you young people, need to pick up. This is where we left. But we have to be able to talk to our children when that question is, Grandma, Mom, Dad, what did you when all this was going on in Africa? We have a responsibility to fix it for our children because it's enough.
And those who will say, look, all that doesn't matter as long as I have a very nice bank account, my kids will not worry, my descendant will never have to need again. Maybe that's what matters. All you're talking about is just utopia.
Well, what you notice in any society, you're always going to find people that they're selfish. They don't understand what it means. Yes, quite right. We live out in the diaspora and even on the continent. People have a job and a house, and they can go on vacation once or twice a year, and they think they've arrived. Those are selfish people. They're there in our society. They must understand that there's something bigger. Real things. What about your legacy? What about race? Are you the manner in which the black race lived? Are you the manner in which the black race, the condition under which the black race is as today? How to go to sleep at night? What is it all about anyway? It's not about money. It's not about material things. It's about doing the right thing, making this world a better place. When we do not make this world a better place, not only are we doing a disfavor to the black children, we're doing a disfavor to all children of the world. This world belongs to our youth regardless of their color. And we as elders, we have a responsibility to make it better. The child growing up in America, regardless of your skin, this world is yours to explore and enjoy. The little girl growing up in Africa, regardless of your skin color, is yours to enjoy. We need to make sure that this world is for our children and they can live this world and into the fullest. We have done as elders is create boundaries and discrimination and taught our children to hate. That has got to change. And it starts with us, the adults. We need to fix this world for our children.
Talking about the diaspora and our capacity, I had a question from an interested party in the ADDI project. Interestingly, you used the example of the airport in Mali. If a country wants to build the airport here in Africa, do the diaspora, the African diaspora, have the capacity to build such an airport?
No, of course, absolutely. If I were to share with you the expertise that I've seen as I've traveled just in the Americas alone, that's before Europe, we have every capacity you could ever think of. Let me use an example of the, talking about airports, the Atlanta Airport. Atlanta Airport is the biggest and most well-run airport in the world. That airport, when it was getting ready to be built, Mayor Maynard Jackson would not sign off on it unless 50% of the contractors were black. They tried to say, well, with the black contractors, threw away the paperwork and said, until you can find 50% black, he was not going to sign off on that airport. Of course, they did find the black contractors. Our airport was by 50% black contractors. It is being run by 50% black contractors. Like I said, it is one of the biggest, most well-run airports in the world. And so we have the capacity we need. You talk about engineers. I was talking to a brother out of Cameroon. He's an engineer who's been with the California highway. Is an engineer highway system. He was responsible for the construction of some of the bridges and the maintenance of their railway systems. We have a network of engineers who are doing all kinds of infrastructure jobs in this country and Europe. I have a network of miners who are ready to go in and take over all kinds of mining jobs from the smallest to the largest. Hotel people of hotels and cleaning of hotels, healthcare, education. There is nothing, energy, all kinds of hydro, solar, you name it. The expertise is everywhere. I have met all of them. Speaking of something that I heard of, I have met them, met with them, and I've spoken to them. That's why I will never be tired. I know they need to come home, and they are ready to come home. All we have to do is unite. Oh no, my brother, the expertise is right here in the diaspora.
What about nuclear? What about nuclear energy and space travel?
Same thing. Some of the best scientists, African diaspora. I mean, you take, for example, the very first female to go to the moon. That's an African diaspora. We have many other African diaspora who are in space science. Go to NASA, and you'll see the number of Black people you find there. We are everywhere. There is no sector that
You're talking about May. You're talking about May. Is that Mae Jemison you're talking about?
That's correct. Yes.
Sister Mae Jemison, the first.
She was
African
the first
woman.
female. Yes.
Okay. All right. And also.
That's correct.
Okay. Also, a Ghanaian doctor, I think Dr. Kluche, is a mission manager in Houston. So yes, the point is that the long and short is anything that Africa needs done to move forward, they can find an African somewhere in the world to do it. True or false?
And for me, from experience, what I've seen, and that's why I know what to do is nice and the history.
The African Diaspora Development Institute, ADDI, that you formed, tell us about it. What's the vision there?
ADDI is the realization that the only missing link for Africa to move forward as an integrated Africa, a prosperous Africa, and a peaceful Africa, the missing ingredient are in the diaspora. We were going to have 3 luncheons and 3 dinners. The president was going with small groups of businesses to have a more independent conversation. And by the time everybody left, we would have an ADDI office in that country, which was going to be manned by 2 diaspora from Zambia, 2 diaspora, 1 African-American, 1 Caribbean, and 2 local Zambians to man that office to make sure that all the projects we are going to be involved in Zambia are going to go on as seamlessly as possible, particularly those companies that are going to be doing business in Africa. In addition, we're also going to have $100,000 no interest loans to the Women Empowerment Program, $100,000 no interest loans to youth empowerment. The president of Zambia had agreed to match dollar for dollar any of his own personal funds, any funds that we brought into the country for the women and the youth. Again, those loans are there to help women get started. We're starting small, but you can imagine where we would be 10 years from now if we continue to put just $200,000 into that country and continue to give no interest loans to women and youth. And some people have said, oh, what can a person do? Loans are going to be $250 to $1,000. What can one do with $250 to $1,000? Well, in Africa, that's a lot of money. You take $500, a young man can buy a table, a chair, an umbrella, and their first set of SIM cards. Now, a business selling SIM cards. A woman who can sew $300 and buy a sewing machine, and the $200 left, she buys the thread and the fabric needed to start her business sewing. $250, a woman who wants to start a garden right outside town, she can buy the right seed. Before you know it, she has a bumper crop, and now she's supplying vegetables to the local market. There's so much that can be done. African women and so creative. All they need is just a little help to take level. And also when it came to women empowerment and youth empowerment, that are going to be going with us in Zambia, we had over 300 businesses that have already signed up. The plan was to make sure that every woman that we give a no interest loan to, they also have a mentor in the diaspora. Only commitment we are asking from the mentor in the diaspora is to make sure that you talk to them once a month and commit to give them $100 a year if they need it, a minimum of $100 a year if they need it, because I know we can. The same was true with the youth. Every youth who got a loan would get a mentor in the diaspora who will make sure that we talk to them to make sure whatever it is that they succeed at what they're doing. And also the team in that country would make sure they monitor, talk to them, and make sure that before they fall apart and the business is there to support them. So we're simply, to whom much is given, much is expected. We waste so much money right here in the diaspora. We go to McDonald's and spend $100 and not even think twice about it, only to give ourselves high blood pressure and become fat, But we want people to wake up and realize whatever little bit you have, you can make a difference. So yes, actually, on that note, we're asking people to go to ADDI. Not only must you register, look at all the programs that we have, you must donate. We have one more project we're working on, which is the Legacy Project, where we are saying, particularly the African Americans, Afro-Caribbean, and first generation Africans who are children of continental Africans born outside Africa, are not going to know Africa by osmosis. They must go home. So we are hoping beginning August next year, depending on how it is, we'd like to offer them a round trip ticket to Africa to spend a month at a university. We have met with Association of African Universities. They represent over 400 universities. So the student just basically have to say, I want to go to Mali. I want to go to Central African Republic. I want to go to Nigeria. And AA must identify a university where they can stay for a month. They don't have to pay for stuff. And while they're there, they're going to be assigned to a host parent where they can visit weekends or nights. So we're simply saying, as African diaspora, as Africans, we can take care of ourselves. And so we're putting all these systems that are low-hanging fruits, things that we can do very, very easily, quite painlessly, to begin to make a difference and change our sex as the Black race.
Okay. I want to thank you for making time for us. I have one final question for you. All right. You are a very dynamic woman. As I've seen you, everything that I've read and know personally about you, very dynamic. First time I interviewed you in Dallas, you made a statement that reverberated across the continent. You said, and I quote, Black men have let the continent, no, let me rephrase. African men have let the continent down. When you look at Africa today, I don't see a woman president. Today, African Unity Day 2020. What do you think it would take, or what do dynamic women such as yourself have to do to assume the mantle of leadership here in Africa?
Well, I think African Union is on the right track. They have gender parity 2025. I think President Kagame is leading the way with about 64% female parliament, about 40% female cabinet. Ethiopia is right behind. I think they have about 30% female cabinet. We have a female president. We have a female minister of defense. Zimbabwe is coming along. We have a female minister of defense, and many other countries around 25 to 30% female representation in their parliaments and cabinets. So we hope that 2025, all the heads of states are going to take that heat seriously and answer that call to make sure that we get more and more women in leadership roles. So to answer your question, I think that men need to realize that if they allow us, if they can pave the way and make it just a little easier for us to take those leadership roles, they will find us that we will make good partners. Yes, we're not saying we're going to take over all of Africa, but we're saying we make good partners when we work together. I would like to echo the words of President Obama when he said, if we were to allow women to lead the world for 2 years, the world will change forever. I tend to say I agree with him on that. We're very practical in how we approach things. And of course, we're used to juggling 10 balls at the same time. So yes, it's a challenge. It's a journey that we must partake. It's an uphill battle, but it's definitely a battle that we are willing to fight. It's a struggle that we are willing to fight, and we're up to the challenge. So you, our men, I know for a fact, you understand the need for us being on the table with you. I think I hear more and more men openly saying they want to let the women lead. So that's refreshing, actually, and particularly coming from African men to hear that. But slowly but surely, a lot of African men now understand that they need their women on the table with them.
My sister, you've made my African Unity Day even brighter. So thank you for appearing on Diaspora Weekly, special edition of Diaspora Weekly on African Unity Day. And just wish us the best African Unity Day.
Well, thank you so much for having me, my brother. And above all, I want to thank you for all the good work you are doing to promote our Africa and highlighting these pivotal issues that should be front and center of conversations on all our dinner tables and all kinds of platforms across the continent. The conversation about why we must wake up must reverberate throughout the continent. We must continue to speak our truth. And the work you're doing, I can't commend you enough. So we're truly grateful for all you're doing, and to your audiences and to all people of African and my brothers and sisters on the continent. Happy Africa Day. Luta continua.
Thank you.